Good evening, everybody. I apologise to you who've seen the slides before. I will start with a general overview of the business, but at the end I'll give you some up-to-date information about our results and so on. So, as an introduction, Allergy Therapeutics, as it says in the name, we're in the allergy field. The allergy field is worth probably about $11 billion currently. There are several areas of the market that aren't serviced at the moment, like food allergies, and I'll come on to talk about that later. The part of the market we're interested in is about 10% of that, of the order of about roughly around $2 billion. And that's the area of the market where there's immunology treatment. So most of the market is related to symptomatic. That's over-the-counter type products, the type of things that you can go to Boots and get, which is basically to try and reduce the symptoms that you get from hay fever and such, and house dust mites and so on. Whereas the area we're looking at is immunology, and it's for patients that have moderate to severe symptoms. That's people who can't sleep at night, can't actually hold down a job properly because of the effect they have from pollens or other areas, house dust mite and other things. As far as our product is concerned, and the driver of our business is very much to do with convenience. And our theory is, and it's a statement that's been made long ago by the head of the FDA, is you can have a great product, but if your patients don't use it, it's useless. And the whole thing about our product is we've gone for convenience. So we have a short treatment so that patients don't need to visit the doctor that often to be treated. Our PQ platform, Pollen X Quattro it stands for, that's 4 injections. So 4 injections, we recommend it's carried out 3 years in a row, but it's a significantly shorter treatment time than our competitors who use 12 to 15 injections, or if they take the oral variety, you're taking a tablet every day for 3 years. And the problem with the longer periods of treatment is very often a patient, for instance, if you're taking treatment over the winter, you don't have the symptoms and you think, why should I continue taking this medicine? So you stop taking it and therefore the effect is removed. We're UK-based company with our main manufacturing facility in Worthing in Sussex in the UK South Coast. We do also have a small manufacturing facility in Spain. We've had 9% annual growth over the last 20 years since we spun out of GSK. And we're listed on the AIM market. I won't spend too long on this because it's quite technical, but just to explain, we really have, in simple terms, 3 major platforms. And 2 of the platforms use a rather similar technology. So in the first column, you see the allergen. So that's the pollen itself, and that pollen is treated. And the concept of that is to reduce the negative effect that the pollen has when it's injected into the body. And then to that, we have 2 further columns here, the microcrystalline tyrosine, and that is used as a depot system so that when it's injected into your arm, it releases it gradually over 72 hours. But also it acts as an adjuvant. And what an adjuvant does is it boosts the effect of that treatment. And here we have the monophosphate lipid, which is also an adjuvant, which we license from GSK. And that gives you the boost, which means that we can make the treatment in 4 to 6 injections, whereas our competitors, as I say, are 12 to 15 injections. The third platform we've got is in the corner, and that's a very exciting one, which I'll come on to talk about, which is for the peanut product, and that's a virus-like particle, which is a completely different technology. And I'll talk a bit about that when we get to further on in the slides. So this is our strategy. The first pillar of the strategy is expanding in Europe. So we have a trading business. This year we had sales of about 74 million. That part of the business is actually quite profitable and performing well. But to be honest with you, the European market itself is slow, very slow growing. We're gaining market share, but overall the market's not growing so fast. However, our second and third pillars are the ones that give a lot of options for the future. The second pillar is a strong pipeline. So you have 2 products in the early part of the pipeline. One is a house dust mite product, which uses the same technology as I talked about earlier for Pollen Quattro, but applied to house dust mite. And I'll come on to talk about that a bit later. And the second product is that peanut product. And the third pillar of the strategy is entry into the US. And as with all pharmaceuticals, the US market is the market with the biggest potential. And the very odd thing about this, and this seems to happen in the US in some small particular industries, is the US is a long way behind Europe. Europe has got, as I mentioned, we've got this technology, 4 to 6 injections, and quite advanced technology. In the US, they're using a technique which we used to use in Europe about 100 years ago. And we're talking, and don't be shocked, we're talking 50 to 100 injections. And I'll come on to talk about the US market and its potential. So to give you an idea of the trading, we haven't yet announced the financial year 2019. We'll do that on September the 25th, so we have to keep an eye out for our results. As you can see on the left-hand side, this is the breakdown of our sales. So 61% of our sales are in Germany. The reason for that is the German market is the biggest market in Europe, and also it's a market where we've particularly focused on, and we've got a lot of historical contacts in and so on. It's also a market that's heavily into injectable treatments. As I mentioned before, there are oral and injectable treatments, and Germany is much more heavily injectable, which is an area we're particularly interested in. You'll notice we're not in France, which actually with the UK are the two other areas with the biggest potential market, should I say. The reason we're not in France is there's a duopoly there, and they protect the market, so we're not in there. You might ask about the UK. Why have we got such a small percentage of sales in the UK? The reason for that is historical. There was a big push quite a long time ago, about 30 years ago, towards over-the-counter. So if any of you do suffer from quite severe allergies, I'm afraid you'll find it rather frustrating because it's very difficult to actually get hold of our products. If you go to your GP, they'll push you in the direction of corticosteroids or Leukotrienes or things of that sort. And it's only if you go to a real expert, and they're probably only about between 12 and 15 in the UK, that you'll actually be prescribed our products. Looking at the right-hand side, you can see the sales by product. We do actually sell some oral products. That's the 13% here, the oral vac, because for some people, they don't like injections and they prefer to take tablets. But most of the rest, and we're talking probably something of the order of 80% of our products are injectable. As I mentioned, Pollen Quattro, which is the main platform. We also have one or two other things here. The Caravac, which is, I'll come on to talk about, which is the house dust mite, and Venomil, which is quite it's quite an old product, but quite interesting, and that's for bee and wasp stings, which actually can be potentially lethal for some people. This is a bit of a shocking slide. These horrible little things are house dust mites. You can't see them, luckily. This is obviously significantly blown up. But it is a severe problem. It's a market worldwide that's probably worth about $3 billion. As I mentioned, we're using the PQ technology to develop a product for the house dust mite. We announced a successful phase 1 trial, which was a safety trial, which had a good safety profile. We do actually, interestingly enough, sell the product, but without the second adjuvant, the MPL adjuvant, in Spain and Austria. And we've only been selling it in Spain for about, I think, 3 years or so on, but it's our highest selling product in Spain. It's very, very successful because of the short treatment time. The doctors are very impressed with it. So, and also the potential for this product is, this is another product which potentially we could take into the US market, and I'll come on to talk about the US market later. Peanut. This is a really fascinating potential product for us. With the other products, as I mentioned, the Pollen Quattro, we use a particular platform where we modify the allergen and then re-inject it into the patient. Our view is if we were to use the same for the peanut, there would be a high risk of anaphylactic shock. And the problem with the peanut is that's extreme. If you compare it to pollens, if you have an anaphylactic shock with pollen, it's pretty unlikely you're going to die. And maybe if you have asthma complications, that may lead to it, but it's very unlikely. Whereas with peanut, as sadly you've probably seen if you read in the papers, and the statistics are that about 150 children a year die in the US, and about 200,000 visits to hospitals in the US due to peanut allergy. It's far more severe. So the concept that we've used in very simple terms, and I'm not a scientist, is we use, and it obviously says it in the name, we have something that looks like a virus. It's made out of a cucumber, but it actually appears to the body as though it's a virus. And then to that we attach the peanut. So that when it's injected, the body doesn't think this reacts in a way to an allergy, it reacts in the way of a virus. And of course, that has a completely different route of attack and it doesn't lead to anaphylactic shock. So we're very excited about the potential of this. Sadly, this is still at an early stage. We did some very successful preclinical work. We're in the middle of scaling this product up, and we expect to have our first in-human trial starting in the summer of next year. We're not 100% sure what the size of the market is. There is no product on the market at all at the moment. There are two businesses you might have heard of, both listed in the US. One called Aimune, and the other one's called DBV. They've both done phase 3 trials, but neither of the products really has come with a full solution. One of them, Aimune, has come up with a powder that you add, so it's almost like a food substitute. You add it to your food in the morning. The phase 3 trial showed that although it could be effective in increasing your tolerance, about 20% of the people who took part in the trial dropped out because they had such adverse effects. They couldn't cope with it. And the other product is an epicutaneous product. That's something that you put on your skin, and it's similar rather to the oral product. So you have to put this patch on your skin every day. It has a good safety profile, but we've yet to see whether or not it's effective. Our product, if it works, as I say, it's only so far been in a preclinical environment. What we're looking to do is something similar to the pollen. So we're looking to do something that's modifying to the body so that you would be given a reasonable amount of protection in the future. I'll now come on to the US market. The US market we've estimated based on the data that we've got from the allergists at the moment is worth currently, and that's excluding any food or anything else, other developments, about $2 billion. As I mentioned, 50 to 100 injections over 3 to 5 years. And the reason for that is that they do inject pollens into people, but they don't modify them. So they need to start with a really homeopathic type level of injection and gradually work their way up because they don't want a reaction, an anaphylactic reaction. So as you can imagine, this figure in the left-hand corner is very interesting. Only 16% of patients actually complete the full treatment, and you need to have the full treatment in order to have the full effect. And even worse than that, half the patients don't even start the treatment. And I think you can think why. If you go to a doctor's clinic, you do the test, and then they say to you, you need to come back potentially 100 times. And don't forget, each time you come back, you have the injection, and you have to sit there for half an hour after you've had the injection to make sure there's no effect. You can imagine the amount of time it takes. And if you've got family, you've got business or whatever, you just simply can't cope. And the other problem behind it is, if you move cities, which as you know, the Americans are quite mobile, if you move cities, it's not a standard treatment. So if you move from New York to San Francisco, you have to start all over again. So it's not a great solution at the moment. So there's a huge potential market out there. So just to come on to the summary and outlook. So this gives you a bit of a overview of the 2019 highlights. We've increased, as you see, for the 12 months to March, we increased our market share by 0.6%, which is pretty good in, as I say, a market that's not growing. We're taking market share from our competitors. We had sales to the end of June, the 12 months, around 74 million, up 8% on the prior year. We had an earnings upgrade in June 2019, and we did a fundraise in June of last year. So we're sitting on a cash balance of 27.4 million. On the left-hand side are the trials. We had a successful phase 2 grass trial previously, and our aim is to start our phase 3 Pollen Quattro grass trial in H2 2020. Now, just to explain that, that trial will be the second field trial that we carry out in relation to Pollen-X grass. If that was to be successful, that would mean that we would be able to file in the US with that product, subject to finishing off the safety database. So it's a big trial for us and has a huge potential for the future. As some of you will have seen, though, since I last talked to you last October, we also announced that sadly our PQ Birch phase 3 trial had failed. Now, that came as a big shock to us. It wasn't something we were expecting. This product is sold on a named patient basis across Europe. The doctors and patients are very happy with it. We've had 2 successful phase 2 trials. But I need to be honest with you, a phase 3 field trial is always challenging in allergy. And that is because there are various factors involved. One is that you have a reasonable placebo effect. There are a lot of people who, when they're injected with something, even if it's a placebo, they feel it's something quite serious, and they expect to get a benefit from it, even if they haven't got an active. Unfortunate, but it's true. And there are strict rules around the way that the testing is done. So for this Birch trial, we did actually see. We took biomarkers, which is basically where we take blood from the patients. And when we looked at the biomarkers, we could see the results of our product were much stronger than the placebo. But that didn't come through in the scores that were the primary endpoint of the thing. And just to give you an idea, the measure of the primary endpoint for these type of trials is 50% on scoring of the patients. So it's what the patient feels, whether they feel they're feeling better or not better, or worse or whatever. And the other 50% is on the amount of rescue medicine that they're receiving. So the challenge for us is to make sure that our design of our phase 3 grass trial, that we use all the learnings from what we've seen in this Birch trial, frustrating as it is. And then finally, I just wanted to come on to the key milestones. As I say, we had a successful, the house dust mite trial, the full year results, which are coming out at the end of September. And then we are expecting shortly afterwards to be starting an oral house dust mite trial. And then looking into next year, we're expecting the 306, which is the second phase 3 trial to start, if all goes to plan. And very excitingly, we're looking forward to the first in-human peanut trial. At this stage, we're not 100% sure. It will include skin prick testing. Obviously, it's very sensitive because this is the first time it will be tried in humans. But we will also potentially be looking to see whether we could do some subcutaneous testing, which is to actually do the injecting into humans. So there's quite a lot to look forward to. Okay, thanks very much.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Nick.
Hello. I used to work in the pharma industry, in particular regulatory affairs. I see you've got a big rollout in Europe, but I'm a bit surprised that you've been so slow in getting into North America. Why is that?
I think, to be honest, the reason for the North American, the time it's taken us to get into North America is we've had some history of attempting to get into North America. We did start quite some time ago. We did go through a period when we had to stop. What happened was we had a a phase 3 trial for ragweed, and we had a patient who became sick during the trial. And if that happens, you basically need to stop. Further research was done on that patient, and it turned out that they had other medical complications which had caused the problem. It wasn't our drug. But what happened was, at that stage, the adjuvant I was talking about, the MPL, that wasn't in a product that was on the market, and therefore the FDA wanted to understand more about what that adjuvant was doing. Now, we were quite lucky because we are, as you notice, a relatively small business, but luckily we'd licensed this adjuvant system from GSK, and they've used it very successfully in 2 or 3. They've got 2 or 3 blockbusting drugs it was used in. So they produced a large amount of data to show the safety profile of it and how it had been used in other drugs. So in the end, the FDA agreed for us to release and continue with our trials. So we have had some delays in the move towards the US, but we're moving forward. The other complication that we've had in the past is also trying to align the two sets of regulators. You may well know the European regulators take quite a different view from the US regulators. And what we've been originally went with the European regulators to get the first approvals, but later on what we've done is to try and align our trials. So that's what we're doing with our grass trial, to try and align it so that we can get both approval in Europe but also in the US at the same time.
Nick, when you announced your Birch pollen results, I think it was February or March, there was quite a bit in the RNS said that you'd be poring all over the data to try and to get to the bottom of what was the reason it failed and whether or not the product had any future. I think you've addressed the question about. You haven't addressed the question about the future yet. Are we going to be able to sort of revive this and run another study? And does this negative result have any effect on current sales where we're selling it on a named patient basis?
The position on the product itself is we've learned a lot from the failure, and as I mentioned, we're going to put that into the grass. But the sequencing now is that we want to focus on the grass. So we first focus on doing the grass trial, and if that's successful, then we'll go back to consider what will be next in the process. And it's likely we will come back to the Birch game because, as I mentioned, the Birch product, we've had 2 very successful phase 2 trials. They're the dosing trials. And we actually sell it as a named patient product on the market. And the doctors and patients are very happy with it. So our view of it is a product that works. However, there are challenges, and that's what I was talking about. There are challenges of getting these type of allergy products through a field trial.
So there's not a danger that you're told to withdraw it from markets where it's sold as a named patient basis?
Well, if it is seen that the product's completely failed, then there would be a risk of that. But as I say, we do have evidence that the phase 2 trials worked, and that we've had patients who are happy with what we've got. We've obviously got to convince the regulatory authorities of that. Yes.
Yeah, this is the first time I've seen you, so apologies for the naivety. But
No.
you've obviously, it's very thematically potent, and the share was over £1 before the crisis. But I'm more interested in why it's gone down by more than 2/3 in the last 2 years. And I imagine that a lot of it is to do with this third quarter trial that had to be stopped. But I imagine there must be other things at play as well. So could you just talk a little bit about the relationship you have with the institutional market? You've got 6 brokers following you, which is pretty good. And have you disappointed on profitability at other points during the last 2 years? When can you become profitable? What will it take to become profitable? How much do you rely on that peanut thematic to reignite interest in the company?
Right. Yes, you're quite correct. The move in the share price, a significant amount of that was due to the failure of the Birch product. I think the immediate response of the market was, and that is usually when someone has failed a trial, the next thing that happens is that they ask all the shareholders for more money. We have enough cash. We've said we have enough funding currently to pay for that phase 3 grass trial. But there are certain other factors in the market, as you well know, particularly in the AIM market, and particularly in pharma in the AIM market, a lot of share prices have been quite heavily hit, and that's been on the back of the sort of Neil Woodford and one or two other investment funds which have been hit across a large number of businesses.
Is he a shareholder?
He isn't a shareholder of our business, luckily. But that has obviously affected the market. He pulled out of. He didn't invest in, and there are one or two other institutional shareholders who also followed him in their strategy, and they've also been. If you're to talk to anybody, investment manager in the AIM market, you'll know that they're all out looking for bargains, because there has been quite a withdrawal of some institutions from the AIM market, and particularly from the pharma part of the AIM market. So that's probably the second point. And the third point is that currently quite a significant amount of our shares are held by institutional or large investors. So the actual free float is relatively small at the moment. So that tends to mean it's more volatile than if it was broadly held, yes.
What about when's profit?
Oh, sorry, yes, the profit question. I'm afraid I've got to disappoint you there, but I will be honest about this, which is we are not aiming for profit in the short or medium term. And the logic behind that is we will be spending on the development of those products. So the major inflection points are likely to come with continued growth of the business, a successful grass trial, successful peanut trials as well. But on the back of that, what we'll be intending to do is to raise further funds to actually carry those forward, because for the peanut, we're starting a phase 1A, and from that we'll have to move on to further trials. It is more expensive to develop than a pollen product, but obviously if you look on the side of the grass, if that grass trial is successful, we'll need to complete the safety database, and then we'll have to start building the infrastructure if we go that direction in the US. Potentially we might do a deal with somebody else. We haven't yet decided which route we're going to take. But then obviously we would like to bring forward the rest of the portfolio. I mentioned earlier we had a ragweed phase 3 trial that was put on hold. We'd like to carry, that's a really good product and it would be excellent in the US. So what we'd like to do is build out the portfolio in the US. But obviously the strategy is that we start with grass, we get grass through the gate, and then we go back to work on other products.
Nick, is anybody else looking at this cucumber-based virus-like particle for other allergy vaccines, or are we are we blazing a trail? Are we the first of our kind?
I believe we are first of our kind. We don't know of anybody else who's using that technology. It has been used in various other areas quite successfully, actually. But in the allergy area, it has not been used. Yeah.
And the two competing companies you talked about who are developing it, the French one, is it DBV, and the American one, the AIM-Immune.
Yeah.
What technologies are those two using?
Well, AIM-Immune, which is the company I described that had the peanut extract that is crumbled into your food, I think it's simply a way of processing and encapsulating the product. It doesn't really as such have an advanced technology. It really is to increase tolerance and it's more to the control of the amount and so on, and increasing it over time. And funny enough, if you were to talk to people in the past about how they did things, that's actually how some doctors did, which was to crumble down peanuts and gradually feed a bit. But the worry about that type of thing is that you have to be, as a parent, well, first of all, you have to start that in hospital, but as a parent, you need to be vigilant the whole time, every time your child has a meal, to make sure you give it the right amount and not too much and not too little. So there isn't so much technology around that. And then the second one, which is DBV, which is a epicutaneous patch. So it's a patch you put on your body. It's got little hairs in it, and you absorb it through the hairs into the under the skin. Downside to it is the problem is if you load up too much of the peanut protein into it, then you tend to get a rash on the skin. So actually the strength of the treatment is not so it's not so strong. So that's why it's a bit like the oral one, where you need to keep on taking it for a long period of time.
Lovely. Perfectly on time. Nick, thank you very much indeed. Thank you to all of our presenters.